In the quaint town of Klingenberg, Germany, the church bells tolled, signaling the end of the evening mass. But for the Michel family, the tolling wasn't just marking the time. It was a foreboding reminder of the darkness that had taken root within their home. Anna, a friend of the Michel family, recalls the first time she heard the chilling tale. It was a summer evening, and I was visiting their home. I noticed a photograph of a young, radiant woman on the mantel. "Who's this?" I asked. Anneliese's mother hesitated, her eyes misting over. "That's our daughter, Anneliese," she whispered. "But she's not the same anymore." The very mention of Anneliese's name seemed to cast a shadow over the room. Anna, intrigued and concerned, probed further. "What happened?" The story that followed was one that would grip the nation and challenge the very fabric of faith and reason. Klingenberg was a town where the picturesque beauty of its cobblestone streets and rustic homes was juxtaposed with the dark cloud that had settled over the Michel residence. The town itself was deeply rooted in Catholic tradition, with church spires piercing the skyline and the hymns from the chapel serenading the streets at dawn and dusk. Life was peaceful, predictable, and even routine until whispers of Anneliese's affliction began to spread. On entering the Michel household, one was met with an almost palpable tension. The once cheerful home now echoed with unexplained sounds, faint whispers, inhuman growls, and the chilling sound of sobbing from Anneliese's room. Anneliese herself, once a vivacious and devout young woman, was now rarely seen outside. On the few occasions she did emerge, she was unrecognizable, her sunken eyes, pallid skin, and emaciated frame a testament to her suffering. Neighbors would often hear her screaming in the late hours of the night. Some claimed they'd heard multiple voices, speaking in languages that Anneliese had never learned. Children would rush past her house on their way to school, fearing the rumors of the possessed girl. But it wasn't just fear that enveloped the town, it was pity too. For amidst these rumors were tales of Anneliese's unwavering faith. She was often seen clutching her rosary, her lips moving fervently in prayer, as if battling the demons that tormented her. The atmosphere in Klingenberg had shifted from one of peace to one of eerie anticipation. Everyone felt it. The impending culmination of Anneliese's torment was drawing near. Anneliese Michel was not always the center of whispered rumors. Born into a devout Catholic family, she was the picture of piety from a young age. Her mornings began with prayer, and her evenings ended with scripture. Those who knew her often remarked on her kindness, humility, and unwavering faith. As a young girl, Anneliese had dreams of becoming a teacher. She would often gather the children of the neighborhood and play school, joyfully taking on the role of the teacher. The little classroom she created was a haven of learning and laughter. Friends and family were certain she was destined for great things. Her relationship with her parents, Anna and Joseph Michel, was a close one. They were a tight-knit trio, often seen attending church together or partaking in community events. The Michels were respected in Klingenberg, not just for their faith but for their commitment to the community. But life took a drastic turn when Anneliese started experiencing seizures in her teenage years. It began with subtle tremors, but soon she'd be found in a trance-like state, eyes rolled back, murmuring words no one could understand. Medical consultations resulted in a diagnosis of epilepsy, but the treatments seemed futile. As years passed, the symptoms worsened. Anneliese began to despise religious objects, claiming they burned her skin. The sweet, devout girl now spat venomous words, her voice taking on a guttural tone. The family, desperate and distraught, sought spiritual guidance, believing their daughter to be possessed. Father Arnold Renz and Pastor Ernst Alt, appointed by the church, took a keen interest in Anneliese. They observed her, noting the violent aversion to sacred objects and the multiple voices that spoke through her. Their conclusion was unanimous. Anneliese was under the influence of several demons. the decision to perform an exorcism was made. Throughout this ordeal, a glimmer of the old Anneliese occasionally surfaced. She'd whisper prayers or sing hymns from her childhood, fighting the entities that tormented her. This battle of wills, between Anneliese's faith and the entities, became the talk of the town. Evenings in the Michel household began to take on an eerie stillness. The once joyous home, echoing with the sound of Anneliese's laughter, was now a place of whispered conversations and shadows that seemed to linger just a little too long. As word spread of Anneliese's condition, the once tight-knit community began to distance themselves, with children being warned to stay away from the Michel house. Anna, Anneliese's mother, would often find herself staring at old photographs, trying to piece together when things began to go awry. She remembered an incident from Anneliese's childhood when she was playing in the fields. Anneliese had claimed to have seen a dark figure that disappeared into the woods, but Anna had dismissed it as a child's imagination. Father Renz and Pastor Alt started frequenting the Michel house. During their visits, the two priests would often retreat to Anneliese's room, their sessions with her stretching late into the night. The sounds that emanated from that room sent chills down the spines of those who heard them: guttural growls, high-pitched laughter, and sometimes agonizing screams. The townsfolk began whispering about the history of possession in the Michel family, recalling tales of a distant relative who had similarly shown signs of demonic influence. These tales, though brushed aside by the family, sowed seeds of fear in the community. In town, there were reports of strange occurrences. Cattle behaving erratically, unexplained shadows moving in peripheral vision, and even devout churchgoers experiencing unsettling dreams. Many began to wonder if Anneliese's possession was an omen or the result of some past misdeed. Rumors of a curse associated with the ancient chapel in the woods began to circulate. Old-timers spoke of a pact made generations ago, and how the price for breaking that pact was a soul. The younger generation dismissed these tales as mere superstitions, but there was an underlying fear that something from the past had been awakened. As the date of the exorcism drew closer, Anneliese's episodes became more frequent and intense. It was during one of these episodes that she uttered a prophecy in a voice not her own. "When the first light of dawn appears, the truth will be revealed, and a price will be demanded." The gravity of the situation began to weigh heavily on the Michel family. Father Renz and Pastor Alt, having exhausted all possible medical explanations, were now convinced that they were dealing with a genuine case of demonic possession. They began preparing for a series of exorcisms, the likes of which hadn't been performed in decades. With every passing day, Anneliese grew weaker, often fasting and claiming she was being instructed by the demons. Her once bright eyes were now sunken, surrounded by dark circles, and her pale skin clung tightly to her bones. Anna, unable to bear the sight of her daughter in such agony, turned to her faith. Every evening, the Michel family gathered in their living room, reciting the rosary and seeking divine intervention. As word spread, the town was divided. Some believed that Anneliese was truly possessed, while skeptics whispered about mental illness and the dangers of religious fanaticism. Many in the community began attending church more frequently, their faith shaken by the events unfolding in the Michel household. Within the walls of the house, time seemed to stretch and warp. Days felt like weeks, with Anneliese's tormented screams becoming the haunting background noise of their daily lives. In between her episodes, she would speak of visions of demonic entities, claiming they tormented her with images of hell and eternal damnation. Father Renz and Pastor Alt, now more determined than ever, began the arduous process of obtaining permission from the Catholic Church to perform the exorcism. Every night, they pored over ancient texts and scriptures, preparing themselves for the spiritual battle that lay ahead. The tension was palpable. Every gust of wind, every creak in the house, was met with fearful eyes. Anneliese's younger sisters, terrified, often found solace in their mother's embrace, praying for their sister's salvation. The eve of the first exorcism was a particularly stormy night. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and rain lashed against the windows. The Michel house, dimly lit by candles, felt like the epicenter of a battle between good and evil. In the early hours of the morning, as the family tried to catch a few moments of rest, a bone-chilling scream echoed through the house. Rushing to Anneliese's room, they found her standing, eyes rolled back, speaking in tongues. It was clear, the entities within her knew what was coming. The morning of the exorcism arrived, bringing with it an oppressive atmosphere that weighed on the hearts of all who entered the Michel home. The air felt thick as if charged with electricity. As Father Renz and Pastor Alt entered Anneliese's room, they found her lying on her bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, an eerie calmness masking the turmoil inside. With the room prepared and the necessary tools laid out, the priests began reciting prayers and sprinkling holy water, setting the boundary for the forthcoming spiritual warfare. Anneliese, sensing the impending confrontation, began to convulse, her body arching and contorting in ways that seemed humanly impossible. The voices that erupted from her were no longer recognizable as her own. They taunted, jeered, and screamed in languages long forgotten. The priests, holding steadfast in their faith, began the rite of exorcism. Every word they spoke was met with a violent reaction from Anneliese, who thrashed and spat, her strength seemingly amplified. Anna, her heart breaking, watched from the doorway as her beloved daughter endured unspeakable torment. Hours felt like days as the battle raged on. The room grew colder, shadows danced on the walls, and an unseen force seemed to push against the priests, trying to halt their progress. The climax of the exorcism came when Anneliese, with superhuman strength, broke free from her restraints and lunged at Father Renz. With a forceful command, the priest ordered the entities to leave Anneliese's body, brandishing a crucifix and pushing it against her forehead. In the ensuing struggle, a blinding light filled the room, followed by an ear-piercing scream that echoed throughout the house. Then silence. Anneliese collapsed, her body limp and exhausted. The room, once filled with tension and chaos, was now eerily still. Father Renz and Pastor Alt, drenched in sweat and visibly shaken, offered a prayer of gratitude. It appeared the exorcism had been successful. However, as days turned into weeks, it became painfully evident that the exorcism had not rid Anneliese of her tormentors. She began showing signs of distress once again, and it became apparent that the entities were not only still present but more determined than ever to claim her. One evening, as Anna was preparing dinner, she heard Anneliese speaking in her room. Entering, she found Anneliese not alone, but in conversation with an unseen presence. To Anna's horror, Anneliese's voice alternated between her own and the chilling voices of the entities. They were mocking the efforts of the priests, stating that they had only grown stronger. The priests were called back urgently. But upon their arrival, Anneliese did something unexpected. She warned them to stay away. She expressed that the spirits were infuriated by the previous attempt and threatened grave consequences should they try again. It was as if Anneliese was trying to protect them from the wrath she knew awaited. To everyone's astonishment, Anneliese insisted on facing her tormentors alone, believing that she was chosen for this suffering to atone for the sins of others. She saw her ordeal as a form of penance, a sacrificial offering to protect others from the same fate. While the priest and her family were desperate to intervene, Anneliese refused any further exorcisms. Despite the unspeakable torment she endured daily, she believed it was her destiny and would lead to a greater good. In the summer of 1976, Anneliese's health rapidly declined. The weight of her spiritual burden seemed to manifest physically, leaving her frail and weak. On a fateful July morning, Anna entered Anneliese's room to find her daughter lying still, a serene expression on her face. Anneliese Michel had passed away. The news of her death sent shockwaves throughout the community and the Catholic Church. How had this happened? The legal system took interest, and Anneliese's parents, along with the priests, found themselves facing charges of negligent homicide. The trial was sensational, drawing attention from all over the world. The courtroom listened in horror to the audio recordings of the exorcisms. Expert testimonies contradicted each other. Some argued that Anneliese had been mentally ill and was deprived of medical care. Others believed that she genuinely suffered from demonic possession. In the end, the priests and Anneliese's parents were found guilty but given a lenient sentence, considering the unique circumstances. They were sentenced to 6 months in jail, suspended for 3 years, and ordered to pay a fine. But Anneliese's legacy lived on. The house where she lived became a pilgrimage site for many seeking answers or hoping to pay respects. Her story, as tragic as it was, inspired many and led to a renewed interest in the rite of exorcism within the church. People, till today, argue about the truth behind Anneliese's ordeal. Was it a case of medical misdiagnosis or a genuine spiritual struggle? Regardless of the opinions, Anneliese Michel's tale serves as a chilling reminder of the age-old battle between good and evil, faith and skepticism, and the thin line that separates our reality from the unknown.